My name is Robert Straw. I'm the CEO of CEIBS Zurich campus. I'm based in Horgen, Switzerland, on the lake in Switzerland, in the heart of Europe. Thank you for your time today to join this webinar. The webinar's title is The Role of 5G Technology in the COVID-19 Era. We're hosting again, as I mentioned, I'm in Zurich. We've got Luca Valentini, who's actually, we're going to introduce him in a second, from Italy, and Professor Zhang, who's in Shanghai. So you're based all over, so it's great that we're having a global footprint. This is part of a series of webinars that we are offering called Lessons for Leaders from the Pandemic. It's the fourth webinar in the series, and this time we're doing it in partnership with Huawei. So thanks very much in advance. I'd like to show you a little bit about who CEIBS is. We have, CEIBS is a 25-year-old business school based in Shanghai. We're going to share my screen. We were established in 1994. We're a joint venture between the Chinese government and the EU. Our rankings, we're very fortunately ranked number one business school in Asia. Our MBA and our GMBA programs have been ranked 2 years in a row, number 5 in the world. We're very thankful for that ranking. It's a humbling position to be in. We're a business school, a pure business school. We have 68 full-time professors from 13 different countries. Many of them are international. We're very proud of our International Alumni Association, which is extremely strong, of more than 22,000 members in this community. Many of you are on the call as well. So from the alumni, thank you very much for joining. What do? We provide executive business education. We have an MBA in English. We have an EMBA, a flagship program in Chinese. Our global EMBA is in English. We have a finance-focused MBA program. We have a hospitality MBA program in collaboration with another strong Swiss partner, the EHL. And finally, we do thousands and thousands of people attend our executive programs a year. In fact, just to give you a number there, presentation I'll be showing tomorrow to some of our executive committee will show that we have over 17,000 people a year attending our our non-degree programs alone a year. So we're quite a big powerhouse within China and the world for executive education and for degree programs. I'd like to tell you before we move into the webinar today, we always like to give a little bit of a plug of a marketing for the next webinar. The next webinar will also be focused on lessons for leaders from the pandemic crisis. It will be called Agility and Opportunity in a Crisis. It will be led by our Professor of International Business and Strategy, Professor Shamin, as well as 2 entrepreneurs with whom he's been working to share their learnings from the pandemic to show how to adapt, how to innovate and reinvent in this time. So we'll be sending you a link also to register to this mail and a follow-up mail following this webinar. During the webinar today, I asked that you use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. We'll try to answer some of those questions towards the end. We're going to let the speakers first present, and then we're going to entertain questions. But if you use the Q&A function, that's a great way for us to track here in Zurich the questions that are coming in. If you want to chat on the chat function, but the questions you would like for the speakers to be addressing, please address through the Q&A function. Thank you. Before we get into this, and by the way, I'm the moderator of this. I do not claim to be an expert in technology and definitely not in 5G. In fact, just this morning, we were asking around, I held the invisible microphone up to several colleagues and said, what is 5G? Do you know what 5G is? We would like to ask you a couple polling questions as we start off. First of all, do you already know, why are you joining the webinar? Do you know because you know what 5G is and would like to know more about its future and impact? Or it's okay, you don't know what 5G is and you would like to understand it better. There's a lot of technology here. The words, the semantics, and the acronyms that will be thrown at you in the next couple hours, we want to make it clear, concrete, and talk about the use of the technology, not just the technology itself, right? So this is quite interesting. We have about 50 people have answered the poll. Hannah, can they see the poll? Yeah.
I think so.
Okay, so I can see the polling. We've let's show the poll results, Hannah. Thank you. So we've got 73% that are smart, a lot smarter about this than I am. You know what it is, and so you're an advanced audience. 27% is a basic audience like me who really want to understand what this technology is and what it can do to change our lives and that of the corporate. So thanks for that. I would like now to introduce our speakers. We have Professor Zhang. He's an associate professor of strategy at CEIBS. His research focus is on the interaction between strategy and capital markets. He's been invited to present his research in leading business schools in Asia, in Europe, and North America. He's also been here to our campus to teach different programs over the years. And he also gives keynotes on to leading industrial conferences as well. Again, to give credit to all the work that both of you are doing, it's very hard to do in about 15 seconds. Luca Valentini is also here with us. He's an executive product manager working at Huawei West Europe. I believe you're physically based in Italy. You're an executive product manager in wireless network marketing and solution sales department. So I understand because you're in sales, you also have to be able to use the wording that non-technologists can understand. So that's us in the business area. You joined the firm back in 1916. You've worked more than 20 years in the telecom industry, and your major focus right now is 5G and the FWA. Luca.
Correct. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us. I turn the floor over to you, Luca.
Okay, so I share my screen. Could you see it, right?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So I would like to start giving some high-level description about the status of 5G and also some forecast in 5 years to now in 2025 regarding the ICT investment. So referring to 2019, last year, what we saw is that the 5G deployment was faster than expected, certainly faster than it was 2G, 3G, 4G. Globally speaking, there were 348 operators that invested on 5G network. And at the end of the year, 61 commercial network happened. We saw innovative services to consumer segment. So augmented reality, virtual reality, cloud games also very important, and also fixed wireless access. We saw also a kind of a change of paradigm comparing, let's say, the tariff. Before it was mostly volume-based. Now we see speed-based, but also latency-based, because with 5G, you know, we can provide a slow latency. So for the video games, it's very, very good. And also the speed is important. So you can tariff the speed instead of just the volume. But in 2019, we saw also some 5G use case pilot for the industry. And I will be speaking about these cases later. In terms of forecast, what we see in 2025 is that on the ICT investment, there will be 4.7 trillion, of which 35% will be on the 5G ICT market. Here, I would like to highlight the fact that the mobile operators will have the chance to change their role in the ICT value chain. For the moment, they are mostly a pipeline, so they provide connection. In the future, they will be more integrated service provider, which means they can provide other kind of, let's say, services, higher services, which mean infrastructure, digital platforms, analytics, and also specific services for the industry. What we see also in 2025 is that the volume addressed, the volume of the market addressed by the operator is quite high, which is 840 billion. And we see that the segment, the industry segment not related to connectivity will be 370 billion. So there is a huge opportunity here for the mobile operator. So why 5G? For the 27% that maybe is not so skilled about 5G, 5G is a new technology that provides high speed rate, much more, let's say, higher than the previous technology, 3G or 4G. Low latency, less than 10 milliseconds and even lower, depend on the cases. A huge mobility is a classic for mobile. Can handle a massive number of connections suitable for Internet of Things, a huge reliability, and also 5G is really, comparing to the fixed network, could be deployed very fast. But when we talk about 5G, that's not just this characteristic. We need to understand what is the technology behind. So we talk about the deterministic network. So we can cut the network of the mobile operator into slices, into sub-networks. And this kind of slice can be devoted to particular use cases for the public, so enhanced mobile broadband, but also for the industry, smart factory, and also other kind of cases, with deterministic requirements, which means that we can respect, for example, a latency less than 10 milliseconds with a speed rate higher than 100 megabits per second. And this is also thanks to advanced and innovative technology, which is mobile edge computing, so bringing the capacity close to the base station, together with time-sensitive networking that on the transport line allow, let's say, low latency and stable jitter. There is also an important capacity, which is do-it-yourself. Do-it-yourself means that the operator can show to their customer, industry customer, a kind of portal. So the industry customer can define their network, can profile their network, can define the requirements of the network, the sub-network. And this is very important because this is a self-management from the customer, from the industry. Obviously, all these should be, let's say, completed by automation and artificial intelligence. But now let's see what's happening in West Europe. We see that in West Europe, we are at a very early stage when it comes to 5G use cases, but it's improving, it's increasing a lot. 80% are at the demo stage. 20% are, let's say, kind of pilot, commercial pilot. 50% of these cases involve directly the enterprise, the customer. And that's very important because a partnership, when you have to develop the 5G use cases, is fundamental. 20% involve academia research. 70%, this is another point which is very important, 70% are supported by fund by the Europe or let's say the single country's government. And that's very important because we need fund, we need cooperation, we need partnership in order to develop the user cases. We evaluated that real cases in West Europe, there are more than 100 trials, mostly media entertainment using artificial augmented reality, virtual reality, manufacturing import, also very important. Healthcare, we see how 5G was very helpful in the healthcare in China to counteract the COVID-19. Automotive transportation is another very good field. And then later we see government with smart city, public safety, and also some other like smart agriculture, education, some other. Just to have a quick comparison with China, where I see that the ecosystem is getting more mature than it is in Europe, in a point of view. Just to provide some few information, 5G application industry array, it's a kind of association that includes the major players in the ICT world, which means the three mobile operators in China, the two vendors, Huawei and ZTE, and also the China Academy of ICT. The scope is to push the innovation, to push with the 5G use case development. They developed also a kind of application store. It's a web portal where they record and demonstrate the use cases. And there are already some companies that matched some requirements. So they evaluated the cases and implemented the case in their factory. We see that this portal has at the moment 340 5G user cases. But what is interesting is that there are 100 5G cases that were designed to counteract with the COVID-19. And already some companies are, let's say, implementing such a kind of cases. These cases are mostly related to resumption of work and also prevention of the epidemic. Another information I can provide regarding China market is that in 2019 it took place the kind of 5G innovation contest. It is called Java Cup. And in this contest last year, were presenting a bit less of 4,000 projects, so a huge amount of projects involving more than 10 industries. These projects are all based on 4 fundamental technology, which is ultra definition video, 4K, 8K, AR, VR, robotics, and also drones or automatic vehicles. So it's very important. What I see is that really in China, they are moving forward very quick. Now, let's have a, glance on what was implemented, why 5G was helpful in China to fight against the coronavirus. First of all, it was, and it is necessary to monitor the spreading of the virus in public areas. So that's why in all the major hotspots, whether train station or airports or some major commercial center, they deployed a lot of high definition thermal camera in order to detect the temperature of the people. This is more accurate than the other kind of measurement device and also require much less people. You can imagine how many people would have been necessary in order to trace all these kind of, let's say, temperature in this kind of environment. And also they implemented a kind of a tracking system in order to track the people where they are in, and if they have been in a place where there was a kind of infection. So all these, let's say, systems require a huge amount of data to be uploaded to the cloud. And 5G was really suitable for the purpose. Another case, during the transportation of the patient to the hospital, they implemented a 5G smart ambulance. It was necessary because during this transportation, they could also ask for remote expert consultation. And it was possible because of high resolution video to be uploaded to the network. That was also very important because before reaching the hospital, they were able to identify, let's say, the treatment. So to make a plan in advance. You have to imagine that in Wuhan area, when there was, let's say, the peak of the epidemic, 800 ambulance dispatches per day. That's the figures. In normal days, would have been 400. Again, here we talk when the patient is in the hospital. So they create a kind of network connected all the hospital and medical institutions. Why? Because the local staff was really working very hard. The local resources were not enough. It is, and it was very important to, let's say, access to other available doctors in other hospitals in order to reduce the workload. Rely just on the fixed network was not the best solution because it would have been costly, require more time, and also doesn't cover all the mobility scenario. Just consider from the ambulance, when you arrive with the ambulance, you have to enter the hospital, but also movement of the patient within the hospitals. That's why 5G was developed. They also developed an interesting system, which is based on artificial intelligence. So scanning the patient, all these scans were uploaded to the cloud. On the cloud, there was an artificial intelligence application that was able in less than 15 minutes to understand the status of the patient and provide the answer. That was really helpful for the local staff to quick identify the status and so to take care about the patient. Again, smart robot. It was, let's say, not sensible to use the local resources to, let's say, routine stuff like cleaning, sanitation, bringing medicine to patient. So that's why 5G robots were deployed. Some more other information that I can provide on let's say, 5G, the role of 5G to counteract COVID-19. So you know that in China, 2 more hospitals were deployed in short time. At the same time, in 3 days, it was rolled out a complete 4G and 5G network to cover all these hospitals. So a huge effort from the mobile industry. You have to consider also that in total China, in order to cope with the huge traffic because of what I explained in the slide before. The industry was able to install 63,000 new stations. So again, in less than 2 months, that's really a good target, a really good target. You see here the first 5G remote control ultrasonic robot. And that was important because the doctor who was located in Zhejiang province hospital was able to check the status of a patient in Wuhan without touching the patient. So these reduce the risk also of infection and allow other resources located, let's say, far away, in this case, 100 kilometers away from Wuhan, to contribute. On the bottom of this slide, you can see this telemedicine collaboration solution. I talked about this in the previous slide. That is the artificial intelligence on the cloud as a functionality in order to check the status of the lungs of the patient. What's important to say is that with this kind of a sharing system, all this information are available in all the major hospitals in China, but also involved the World Association of Chinese Doctors, not just in China, but also Chinese doctors working abroad in the USA, in Europe. Last but not the least, during this kind of period, you can imagine that it was strictly necessary to deploy, let's say, to have a powerful, let's say, power supply, stable power supply. So it was really necessary to guarantee this power supply. So more inspection with more people, but this would have been a great risk because the people can get infected. On the other side, this is a very dangerous environment where you can have a flooding, you can have a gas leakage and some other kind of threats. So this is the right environment to deploy a robot, which are the more controlled. And this kind of robot was equipped with a high definition camera with all the sensors necessary. So infrared, temperature, humidity, and also gas detectors. Okay, up to now we have been talking regarding how to build a smart healthcare system to cope with COVID. In these last 2 slides, I would like to talk how 5G can help to quick restart our economies, because it's real now. We are facing, let's say, economic crisis. We need to exploit the technology in order to quick start our economies. Fixed wireless access is a very important technology, a very important services. We have been seeing now that everybody is working at home, remote working. In my house now, there are 4 connections. Me and my wife are working now at home, and also I have 2 kids who are using remote education. And also people stay at home. They need to talk with friends. They need to see the face of their friends. They need to see the relatives, the parents. That's why they are getting used to social media and also video conference. Another kind of services, digital services, like buying food or send packages, and a lot of them. So we are getting used to this. And even when this kind of epidemic will be over, we will rely on this kind of service. This will be our normal life. So for that reason, it's important to have a kind of ubiquitous 5G coverage with a reliable broadband services. Fiber can be a solution in some area, but in some other is not cost efficient and it takes time. Fiber will not cover 100% of the population. In Europe, for example, if we consider fiber to the premise statistic, we see that 30% is the total coverage. But if you consider the rural area, just let's say 10%, so quite low. That's why fixed wireless access was identified very important before the coronavirus, but now is even more important. Also considering the connection for the enterprise, we call fast connection for the enterprise when they are greater than 30 megabits per second. And we see that in Europe, again, less than 40% have such a kind of connection. Again, fixed wireless access is the right solution. This is not in competition with fiber. The operators have 2 tools. One is fiber and the other is fixed wireless access. And they can exploit both technology. Let's say that fiber is more suitable for dense urban area, while on suburban and rural area, it's better to use fixed wireless access. This is, let's say, the rule of thumb. Again, just an example how 5G can be used in order to improve, let's say, our economy, to, let's say, provide a quick restart for our economy. Here, I'm talking about smart factory, but I could have talked about smart agriculture, smart mining, smart power, etc. in all the industry. The goal of this innovation is reduce the cost for the company, increase the productivity, so increase the margin, so for a quick recovery. Classic example of use cases, of 5G use cases in this kind of industry could be smart robot. So we see here an example of an assembly line where on the left part you have the classic robot connected through cables, Ethernet fiber. And this is, let's say, kind of a problem because when you have to reconfigure your, let's say, product line, it takes more time. While if you provide, let's say, smart robot connected to 5G, it's easier. So this reduces the downtime of the configuration, change of the configuration, and increase the productivity. Or we can use augmented reality in all the, let's say, operation activities. For example, there is an employee working on a machinery. You need to understand what's going on, I mean, classic maintenance. And so he can use augmented reality. He can see all the operation, all the steps that he can follow. Not only, he can also have a remote consultation from an expert. So this increases productivity, reduce the cost because of less people, and also reduce the risk of infection because just one people is enough in that location. Again, machine vision quality control, which means to have this kind of camera that check the quality during the assembly line. And that's important here, the reliability. The reliability should be very high because we cannot risk not to detect a faulty piece of our product. So this is nothing new. We presented these cases together with Haier and China Mobile in the World Industrial Internet Conference last year. And where all these cases together with others, for example, in that case of Haier, we have also the smart logistic, so intelligent guided vehicles in the factory. And we use also artificial intelligence in order to improve the processes in the company, so increase the productivity, and also for the smart energy in order to reduce the energy. A lot of cases can be done using 5G. To summarize, what we have been seeing is that the healthcare, the 5G advanced healthcare solution was very helpful for the COVID, but this will be, let's say, our near future, let's say, healthcare system in every country. Very soon we will be seeing this system moving forward, exploiting 5G more and more. Second step, in order to quickly restart the economy that we are facing now, a huge risk, we need to invest on 5G, both for providing ubiquitous broadband services with fixed wireless access, but also to deploy use cases suitable for the Industry 4.0. Third, it's important really to invest. So it's important really that all the stakeholders of the ICT world, and I mentioned the government, I mentioned the regulators, I mentioned the operators, I mentioned ourselves, Huawei, Ericsson, Nokia, the vendors and the other ICT players. We need to invest a lot on this technology. We need to cover with 5G our countries. And also, in order to develop use cases, it's important partnership among everybody because each use case is unique and it requires a tight collaboration with all the others. So I think that's all for my presentation for the moment.
Luca, thank you very much. This is amazing. The exponential opportunities of 5G versus 4G. Again, you could spend hours talking about each one of these case implementation. It's really, before we had, I could almost argue, a linear growth from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, but this is really exponential. Thank you for your inputs. I'm going to turn it now over to you. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Luca. And good afternoon, everyone. And this is Zhang, and I'm calling from our main campus in Shanghai. Nice to see everyone online virtually. So let me get started with my screen sharing. Rob, can you see my screen?
Yes,
Good.
I can. Thank you.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I think Luca has gave us a very nice overview and introduction to the potential of the 5G technology, and I would like to use the next around 10 minutes to actually follow up with his discussion and to talk about, especially in terms of the role of 5G on the other new technology trends that are happening right now, and both in this pandemic era as well as the post-pandemic era. So I've been teaching at working at CEIBS for the past 5 years, and when I was here, I was always asked by our participants and students, Professor, how do you think about this and that technology? So, for example, this is a technology trends map that actually Gartner's group actually was introducing in 2018. And if you look at those 10 technologies that they listed as trendy technologies, even nowadays, they are actually still quite trendy on the frontier of the applications. So how can we make sense of this different kind of technology trends, and how can we sort of, from the business perspective, best kind of spot the opportunities and sort of the future prospects of those kind of technologies? So when I teach a strategy course, we actually have several frameworks, and one of the very useful and very fundamental frameworks is actually to think about where does the advantage of those technologies actually can come from. And in strategy, we actually typically analyze from a value-based framework. So this might sound very terminological and also very abstract, but let me start it with a cup of coffee, okay, Starbucks. I know most of you actually are now in Europe, you might sort of laugh at Starbucks, but in America, in the US, where I used to work, and also in China, actually Starbucks is very popular. And you can think about, okay, typically when customers go to buy a Starbucks coffee, and they are actually they will get some sort of satisfaction, right? So either because of the coffee or because of the experience in the store, or even because of the logo that actually can carry on their cups and so forth, right? And for that kind of satisfaction, you are willing to pay a certain amount of the money, which we call in economics or strategy, willingness to pay, a WTP. And with Starbucks, like all the other merchants, in order to provide this kind of service and goods and services, they need to use different kind of sources of input, which actually has opportunity cost. For example, they need to have the store, they need to rent the store, they need to have the coffee beans, milk, water, they need to have the machine, they need to have the labor, which is barista, so on and so forth, right? So you can think about, okay, for any of the businesses, actually, in order to compete, you first need to create value, which is the difference between the willingness to pay and the opportunity cost of your resource input. And again, the bigger the value can create it, the bigger the pie it is for you actually to go to the next step. And the next step is actually what we call the value capture. And for the value created between the willingness to pay and opportunity cost, and there's different parts. The first part actually is between the willingness to pay and price you charge. And this is what we call the value captured by the customers. And sometimes we also call the economic surplus or consumer surplus. And the other part actually is between the cost you charge by your suppliers versus their opportunity cost. This is what we call the value captured by the suppliers. And what actually the firm merchants actually in the focal actually can really capture is actually the difference between the price and cost, which is what we call value captured by the firm. And you can think about, okay, typically between the value, amount of value created, the amount of the portion you can create, you can actually capture by the firm, by the focal firm, actually depends on how unique your firm is. Right? If you are the only one who can provide this kind of, create this kind of value in collaboration with the supplier and customers, you definitely have more bargaining power actually to charge, actually to capture more value, right? And this is typically protected by your brand, by your technology, by your patent, so on and so forth, know-how, or even your labor, right? Labor expertise. right? So in the case of Starbucks, maybe the coffee tastes almost the same as, or even worse than, for example, the ones that we can got in the coffee in Zurich or in Milan or in Paris. But the brand of Starbucks is so strong that actually, for example, in China, people are willing to pay a premium for their products. Right? So why do I bother to go through this value creation, value capture kind of process? For me, as a strategy professor, every time I was given a sort of new situation, new industry, new trend, I always try to apply what I will do here, an exercise called value creation versus value capture exercise. So back in 2018, when I was asked about the future of this kind of 10 technologies, and the way I sort of try to answer my participants or students in the classroom is that, okay, I will ask them, okay, how much value does this new technology create in terms of willingness to pay, satisfaction, functionality by the technology versus the opportunity cost vis-a-vis the substitute technologies, right? And among them, how much value can you capture because of the brand, because of the patent, because of the know-how, secrets, and so forth. Right? And a lot of the time, actually, you can see is that in the case of these 10 new technologies, back at that time, 2018, we can see that because those are new technologies and those are actually very high-tech kind of applications or technology kind of trajectories, it's very rare that actually we have a problem of value capture. They are well protected by the patent, know-how, secrets, and so forth. And you can see that the big V's means that actually they are very strong in terms of patent protection or know-how protection. The small V's are maybe more competitive and less protected by the patents and so forth. So for most of those 10 technologies, value capture is not a problem. And at that time, 2018, the real problem is how much value they create vis-a-vis the existing substitute kind of technologies. So for example, if you think about the case of VR, right? So how big is the advancement in terms of functionality that VR can bring to the consumers in terms of experiences, in terms of the benefits, versus, for example, the traditional existing technologies, for example, 3D or 2D based kind of experiences, or even kind of picture, right? So if you think about it, for example, VR tour of your real estate kind of tours, how is that different from, for example, your 3D, 2D based kind of pictures, kind of tours, right? And remember, if the superior kind of advance is not there, and on the other hand, VR actually is very costly actually to produce and also to provide as a service. And then you can see that the value created versus the existing substitute technology actually is quite small, right? So if you go through that line of logic, you can see that actually VR, drones, blockchain, IoT, AI, and AR, augmented reality, even 3D printing, they all have question marks at that time in terms of the value created versus substitute technologies or existing previous generations of substitute technologies. And this is why in 2018, my prediction of these new technologies is that the industry robots might have both value creation and value capture, genetic kind of based medicine or therapy or biotech kind of technologies might have relatively decent kind of value creation, but quite strong in terms of value capture. And also big data does create advantage versus traditional data analysis, while they can also have protection from algorithm, know-how, secrets, and so forth. So this is a landscape of 2018, and actually I'm pretty happy that so far, 2019 and until earlier this year, 2020, my prediction actually still holds true. And actually I have been using and sort of prescribing this to my participants and my students. Some of them actually working for investment industry, some of them actually work for example, consulting industry, and also some of them actually work and trying to work in different kind of application kind of industries. And they actually quite happy and sort of grateful to my predictions and so forth. And they appreciate the power of this value creation, value capture kind of framework or logic. So now, following Luca's discussion, and also following the advancement of the 5G technology and also the deployment of the 5G, fast deployment of the 5G technologies in certain countries in this world, I'd like to reevaluate. I feel that actually in the past maybe half a year, I feel that it might be the time actually to reevaluate those question marks and also those V's in the value creation and value capture for those 10 technologies. So here I'd like to ask Hannah actually to post a poll as well. And I'd like to ask you, based on what Luca has discussed, okay, it's a test about what has, if you really pay attention to Luca's content, and also based on what I have discussed in terms of the logic about value creation and value capture, what are the technologies actually do you think that can be most effectively enhanced with 5G? And remember, you can choose multiple technologies, not just one. Any technologies you think that actually can be effectively enhanced by 5G technologies, you can choose. Okay, let's take a test. Okay, about 45 filled out already. 50, good. Almost there. 55 already. 56. 58, sort of pausing at 58. Okay. Okay, you already see the results, right? Pretty good. Actually, it's you followed both Luca's content and also my sharing quite good. Robots, VR, IoT, big data, artificial intelligence actually is the highest, and also augmented reality. Drones, blockchain, and 3D printing actually is still quite low. Very good. It's almost the same as what I would show next. So let me just close the poll results. And exactly, yeah. And actually, let me just hold a minute because the slides is coming later. But let me just show you a few examples. For example, robotics and the AI IoT. And those are some examples, application examples. I'm going to show the results later of the poll later, okay? But let me just, before I show you my sort of new assessment, let me show you two examples. And this is one of our CEIBS alumni company called Quicktron. And this company actually started with warehouse robotics. And you can see that actually they provide robotics solutions to, for example, Alibaba's warehouses that actually they can reduce the use of labor and also increase accuracy, reduce mistakes, and so on and so forth. So, and they have, for example, in the case of Cainiao's warehouse, they have more than 2,400 robots running at the same time in one single warehouse, which greatly reduce the labor usage and also improve the efficiency and accuracy, and so on and so forth. But what they're also doing right now is that with the new 5G technologies, they actually started to deploy their robots in manufacturing plants, manufacturing industries. For example, this is one of the applications that actually they introduced, provided in one of the automakers in China. And they are using actually robots to move big chunk of parts, which are heavy and difficult to move by laborers. This actually are animated pictures. I don't know if you can see from the other side, but you can see that actually, if you can see the animations, you can see that actually the robots can either go straight, move in parallel, or even sort of shun the obstacles, and so forth. And the founder of this company told me that actually this kind of technologies used to be deployed based on 4G network. And because of 4G is much slower and also not very high in terms of connectivity, and also are slow in terms of latency, so on and so forth. So actually they have to use specific kind of Wi-Fi, high-speed Wi-Fi network around this kind of manufacturing websites in order to improve the speed. But he said that now they're actually exploring and working with China Mobile in terms of 5G applications and deploy this kind of deploy this kind of solutions based on 5G technologies. And they say that the accuracy, the response speed, and also the cost of deployment will be dramatically enhanced, and actually which will greatly improve the performance of the system solution, as well as reduce the deployment cost, right? And you can see that actually 5G will increase the value they can create, in addition to the patent and know-how they have. The second one is again robotics, and here are actually animation kind of pictures showing that actually one of the companies, our alumni investment fund actually was investing, Cassie Investment, which is actually based in France, by the way, but it's a Sino-French investment fund. And they invested in companies that actually provide manless mining truck solutions to the mining sites in China. And this is one of the examples that actually they just started to deploy earlier by the end of last year, and actually made a big kind of debut earlier this year during the pandemic. And so for those manless kind of trucks, this is again robotics manless truck solutions based on 5G technologies. And also this is something that actually the trucks actually are all manless, and they are actually all controlled by the central control room based on 5G network, and also the AI and autonomous driving solutions, as well as the controllers in the controlling room. So you can see that in this controlling room, there's only 4 or 5 operators, but actually they can control more than 40, almost 50 fleet truck for those mining trucks. And this is actually very important because you know that at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of the areas in China actually has been locked down, and the people cannot travel freely. And after Chinese New Year, the truck drivers cannot return to this mining site on time. So thankfully to this new system, actually this mining site can keep running after the Chinese New Year break, or immediately. They just need those operators to be on board. Right? So as you can see, represented by these 2 examples, the 5G technology actually greatly change the value can be created by some of these new technologies, as well as by enhance the value can be captured. This actually happens not just during the pandemic period, but also I can forecast and also foresee that because of the challenge of this pandemic, can last for long, or maybe for another a few quarters, or maybe even for a few years, before we have the effective medicine, or before we have the effective vaccine. We can see that a lot of the things that Luca has talked about in terms of the remote working, online commerce, these kind of things, can also happen, and also especially in the industrial sector, the manufacturing side sectors. I can see that a lot of our alumni companies in China has started to think about, okay, do we really need to think about not necessarily manless factory, but also, but if we can reduce the use of labor in this kind of manufacturing sites, can we use more autonomous kind of processes? Can we use more robotics? Can we use more kind of moving robots or transportation robots, this kind of things? And with all these kind of things, we can see that 5G will make a huge difference in terms of the smart factory, in terms of the robotic system, in terms of the manless transportation, especially manless transportation with sort of encircled kind of areas, of kind of closed kind of areas. So going back to our poll, we can see that the 5G actually is going to increase, for example, the performance of the VR greatly, right? In terms of the speed, in terms of the fluency of the experience, and also in terms of the data connectivity. It also increased, for example, the data connectivity and also the power consumption of the IoT system, thus improves the performance. It will also increase actually the performance of AR, AI, artificial intelligence, as well as augmented reality in terms of the amount of the data available, the speed of the data transferring, and also in terms of the performance of the systems and so forth. So as a result, we can see that among these 10 technologies, at least 4 of the question marks in terms of value creation before 5G can be greatly changed or significantly changed or enhanced because of the 5G network's performance. And because of the quick or sort of widespread or sort of accelerated deployment of the 5G network, the adoption costs of this kind of system can also be dropped, because a lot of these things actually is proposed and fostered by the government infrastructure investment. For example, in the case of China, government has been proposing that 5G network is one of the most important infrastructure investment kind of campaigns in the next few years. So government actually is building the infrastructure of the 5G high-speed network connections. And this actually will allow, this is basically like the high-speed railway or high-speed, the highway system, the interstate highway system back in the old days. And this actually will greatly reduce the deployment cost of those new technologies. So on the one hand, the performance will be enhanced. On the other hand, operation or deployment cost will reduce. That actually will greatly change the value that can be created by those new technologies. And if those companies, the new kind of industry players, can also do well on the patent know-how and also kind of competitive kind of secrecy, this actually will foster a lot of the new kind of unicorn players in those kind of new industries. So I think this will actually show exactly my follow-up point in terms of the value that actually Luca laid out in terms of 5G technologies, the performances, and also the implications of enabling and fostering the competitive advantage of those related kind of adjacent new technologies. So this is all my sharings. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you. You amazing. I love the economist view, the technology and where technology and business and looking at it from an economist perspective. It's very important that we're not just doing this to do it. We're doing this to enable societies, enable firms and countries. We have quite a few very interesting questions coming through. I would like to give a little tip though about a little bit of the conditions about the questions that we're going to be answering. If we don't go into politics, very clearly, CEIBS is a business school. It is not a policy institution. We know that this topic is also a highly debated topic also in the trade war going on. We're not going to approach it from that perspective whatsoever. So please, if you've asked a question about that, we're not going to answer it here. We're looking at it from a technology perspective and on the effect on firms and on society from a business perspective. So having said that, I'm going to stick with you since you just finished, and you were giving some great examples and looking at it from an economist standpoint. You gave the example of the role about 5G for IoT, for example. What about, we looked at that one thing on AI, that was the #1 voted. What about AI? Is there any comments you could make specifically about AI?
Yeah, so definitely, I think AI will be very exciting kind of areas for the new technology actually to go further. And I think 5G definitely will play a very significant role in terms of enabling and accelerating the advancement of AI technologies. So if we look at what does AI do, right? So AI is basically building on big data and also building on the analytics of data, and also trying to come up with new algorithms, more smarter kind of algorithms actually to basically help people to make decisions better, and also help us actually to sort of avoid redundant, repetitive kind of works and so forth. Right. So a big role here is that actually a lot of the AI algorithms actually is based on the consumption and also what we call the machine learning from the data themselves. So a lot of the existing algorithms actually requires a big assumption of the amount of data. And with the 5G technology, that actually will greatly, 5G actually will help us because of the high speed, high connectivity, and the low low latency. Or fast latency, right? So that actually will greatly change the way we collect data, and also with, for example, the complementary kind of technology in terms of IoT, in terms of sensors, that actually can help us actually to not just collect more data, but also transfer the data back to the back kind of cloud kind of base to process and learn from the data even more effectively and fastly. And that actually will allow more pattern to emerge and also allow more algorithm to improve by themselves. And in that sense, actually that will help the AI technology actually to move even faster with the advancement of the 5G system. So that would be my brief answer to that.
Thank you. Following on that, I'm always pushing the limit a little bit. You came up with the 10 top technologies that you have been looking into and monitoring for the last 3 or 4 years. I'm always looking at what else. What is the next big thing? What are the other areas that this could be maybe low-hanging fruit, other technologies that we could also be thinking about going forward?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of things actually we can imagine now with 5G as sort of the infrastructure network. We can think about, for example, autonomous driving, which is sort of /AI versus automobile, right? So, or transportation. And that's something that actually can be possible or can be feasible because of 5G network. And because if you think about, for example, the IoT between the cars, right? So one of the things that actually 5G can help us actually to realize is actually it's much faster for the IoT between among the cars actually to exchange kind of positioning information, so on and so forth. And also the 5G actually is quite accurate in terms of the locationing, so on and so forth. So that's something that actually the 5G technology actually can do well. I'm also following actually the advancement on high accuracy or high precision medicine. And that's something that actually 5G technologies can also help us actually both in terms of more smart kind of drug discovery, and also in terms of the telemedicine, and also in terms of, for example, the remote kind of CT kind of ultrasonic that actually Luca was sort of showing us. I think with that actually, if the 5G network actually is widespread, that's going to change our way of life quite a lot. Yeah. So and also I think the way we use devices can also be changed, right? Yeah. So we no longer, if the network is fast enough, then we can sort of turn back a lot of the computing powers back to the server, and we just need the network actually to do this. So maybe our devices will be lighter, and actually maybe we don't even need the mobile phone. We can use, for example, the AR, the augmented kind of AR kind of phones, right? And that phone actually will be very powerful, but also very little power consuming. And that's something actually really happen. Just I know I'm running out of time, but so for example, I would love to have an AR-based kind of glasses, because for example, if I can look at my, so one of these things I always feel embarrassing that I teach for 3 or 4 days of a program, and then I say bye-bye to my participants. And next time I saw them, meet them on campus, I forgot what are their names, where do they come from, which class they attend, so on and so forth. If I can have this kind of AR-based classes, I would love to have, right? So, oh, this is Rob. You're from this XY program, and actually we met actually on the September whatever 10th, right?
Yeah, that's great. Very practical. Very practical. Yeah.
Yeah. So I look forward to that, and companies like Huawei and other players in the industry.
And all of a sudden you have a memory of 5,000 contacts in your head, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or even 10,000, who knows? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Luca, I'm going to come back to you, Luca, on a couple questions, specifically regarding some of the technology. One of the things in preparing for this, one of the questions that comes through, it says 5G versus Wi-Fi 6. Is there necessarily, so these are competing somewhat technologies, is there necessarily a winner or a loser here?
Well, I think that these two are two great technology, and these will help the digitalization. So they will improve a lot our, let's say, Industry 4.0. They have a lot of common characteristics when it comes to latency, when it comes to bandwidth, when it comes to speed rate, when it comes to huge number of connection. All these technology are good. Then they have some huge differences. For example, Wi-Fi is a fixed network. So let's say doesn't provide a full mobility as a, let's say, classic mobile network. Is a low power and so low range technology, which means that, let's say, it's suitable for environment in low range or indoor solution. On the other side, we have to say that there are a lot of devices, Wi-Fi devices, which are compatible with Wi-Fi 6. So pros and cons. Another is that they rely on a licensed spectrum. Yes, it's cheaper, but maybe subject to interference. So on the other side, we have the classic mobile technology. And as such, it can be deployed, let's say, also indoor. But in the outdoor, it's, let's say, the unique technology. Mm-hmm. Rely on, let's say, license spectrum. You have to pay, so it's costly, but it's more protected. So I would say that in general, in my point of view, 5G, which is really suitable for the outdoor, and that's the only solution, and even provide full mobility, can be more suitable for some use cases. Like, for example, we saw before in the presentation of Dr. Zhang, the mining. In the mining, you have to cover a large area. So you provide a 5G technology or 4G, but I would say 5G provided less latency, high speed rate, what is required for this industry. Or, for example, smart agriculture, drones, helping the agriculture field, or maybe also in the smart port. 5G maybe is more suitable. In other kind of application, that could be, for example, smart factory. I believe that both technology can, let's say, have their success. Why not? Because it's a more indoor solution. Up to now, this kind of a solution has been, let's say, in the hand of the fixed technology and also Wi-Fi. But I explained before why Wi-Fi, what is 5G deterministic network. So Wi-Fi was really designed to address such a kind of environments. So I think that in this kind of environments, both can be useful, both can improve a lot our industry 4.0. The choose of one or the other depends really on the specific projects, specific requirements, and also from the asset of the company. What I can say is that I see also a kind of integration among the two technology also, because, for example, fixed wireless access, you have the CPE, which is a very smartphone, let's say, powerful smartphone. It receives the signal from the 5G network, but then provide Wi-Fi coverage, Wi-Fi 6 to other devices. Could be it is for fixed wireless access, but this kind of fixed wireless access services can be implemented also in the industry. So I see also a kind of integration among the two. So let's see what the future will foresee for these two technologies.
I want to focus a little bit on the history and the way forward. So when we look at the history of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5G, 1G came out of actually Japan, and then we see a lot of the technology in the meantime in the 2000s coming out of Sweden, out of the Nordic region, specifically out of Finland with Nokia, and then with Sweden with 3G and 4G being launched out of Stockholm, and now 5G primarily in this almost technology race has been primarily being driven more globally. Is there a risk to Europe being left behind now in this 5G race?
Yes, I think this is a very interesting question. I think that when you talk about Europe, you have to consider the two major competitors of Europe, global competitors in the global market, which is, let's say, Asia, East Asia, and China is one very good example, and is North America, principally USA. So what I see here regarding 5G, the environment, the creation of the ecosystem, I see that both in China and in the USA, all the major stakeholders, they are all aligned. I'm talking about the regulators, the government, the vendors, the politicians, all are pushing forward 5G because they understand that they have to go all together. All the nations should be covered by 5G, and they should provide 5G use case as soon as possible. Yeah. In Europe, we have a kind of disuniform situation. There are some countries which are really pushing hard. I can make some example, Germany, in my point of view, or the UK, they are pushing forward for 5G. But we see now, still now, that there are some countries that they don't have the spectrum licensed for the 5G. An example is France, for example. It was supposed to happen this month, but now it's delayed because of the coronavirus. Or let's say other example could be Portugal, could be Netherlands. Netherlands, a period of 5 gigahertz will be available 2022, one portion, the other in 2026. So I see that as Europe, we try to go, let's say, to march together, but it is not the case. Another risk that I see is that in Europe, the local government see the 5G auction for the spectrum like a way to get money. They don't see this as an investment. And that's, let's say, not so good, because they should see this as an investment, not for the telco industry, but for the, let's say, all the society, for the industry, for the zero. The great risk here is that if the other countries, China, USA, comes before, it's clear that the environment, the ecosystem is better. And so the investors, the research institutes, all these, let's say, capital will move in that area.
Right.
And so maybe there is the risk that we, as Europe globally, not talking about single country, but as Europe, maybe we can be left behind, maybe.
Thank you. A similarly related question for both of you, maybe you could address this one, comes in. It said, when the question that we were asked says, when 3 and 4G were launched, it always seemed targeted at the everyday phone user, the consumer. 5G seems more relevant to industry and corporate use, accelerating complementary technology. Is this the way forward for 5G? We leave the customer behind and focus much more on the corporate side?
If you recall my forecast, the forecast that I showed before in 2025, it seems that, yes, there is a big share of business on the business, both for connectivity, but also for advanced services. But there is still a huge share of business for the consumer. What I see is we will see in the near future both 4G and 5G together.
Okay.
Obviously, 4G will be the evolved 4G with advanced functionality. So they will go along together for quite a long time. The 5G will start incrementing its share slowly, but we start. So maybe, let's say, we'll be focusing, starting from the business, but we start also to be deployed everywhere for the consumer. At the end of the day, let's say we will have, let's say, the transition for the 5G in a long time.
Okay.
So, I mean, I see such a kind of evolution now, 4G and 5G, 4G for the consumer, 5G for both, obviously, but focusing maybe on the user cases. I would like to mention something very interesting. There are some countries in Europe, like Germany, for example, that auction some portion of the spectrum just for local auction, local license for the industry. So there is a good sign that they are focusing on 5G use cases for the industry. And we have seen all the major companies, BMW or the Mercedes, Lufthansa, Technik, the branch for the maintenance, or BASF, the giant chemical company in Germany. They are implementing private network, 5G private network, to make their factory completely digitalized. So that's a great sign, in my point of view.
Thank you. I'm going to give you the last question.
Okay.
Because the last question is more for an economist view. So, and also because of the role of CEIBS in China. So CEIBS has a campus in China, in Africa, Africa, because the amount of FDI from China into Africa is growing incrementally every year in a beautiful fashion. And yet, for this particular technology, we see that most of Africa is on 3G. So we go from 3G and a good portion of the world being in 4G, and now we're leaping to 5G in the advanced economies. Will this affect the rich and the poor question? Do the rich get richer through this? And how can specifically Africa as an investment country catch up?
Yeah, so I think this is a very good question. To be honest, I've never been to Africa so far. So this is all based on my reading and understanding from the second-hand source. So I think the advancement and also the sort of the penetration of 5G technology will be following similar kind of mechanism as 4G, 3G, so on and so forth. So again, it goes back to what I call the value creation, value capture. So for this technology to be commercially viable, business viable, you have to create value, and also you have to actually to be able to capture value from that. And that actually goes back to the last question, which is talk about the to C versus to B kind of scenarios. I think despite all those potential that I described, there's definitely a long way for the 5G to really become as penetrated as 4G is, and so forth. And this is why, for example, it gets started in 2B first, because in 2C you really didn't see the value of the value creation actually is as big as the ones that you see the application scenarios in 2B. So my prediction of the case of Africa would be that it takes time for 5G to get there, and actually in some sense I wouldn't be worried about North America gets rolled out first, and Europe, and then East Asia, so on and so forth, because essentially the consumers and also the applicants, the manufacturers in those countries are essentially paying the cost of 5G development. Right? So despite all this technology available, for further advancement, you still need the resources or so the revenues generated from those applications in those countries, so that you can further improve the performance and further reduce the cost. And by the time that actually the cost is low enough, or the performance is good enough, actually, and also the carriers and also the Huawei's and ZTEs and also the Nokias, they have the resources available, and they will, money is smart. Whenever there's profit opportunities, they will go. This is why they started with 2B first, as we go to 2C, and they will go to other countries one by one, roll out. So I wouldn't be worried about that. And in some sense, and I think in this sense, if 3G and 4G is good enough for the applications in Africa right now, just go with that. I wouldn't be sort of be very hasty in terms of that.
Thank you.
But I have full confidence in the deployment and also the penetration of 5G worldwide.
Thank you.
I'm pretty confident about it.
Thank you. Dear participants, dear Luca, we're over time. I'm cognizant about time and schedules, knowing you have other meetings and other activities and other commitments. I would like to say here, thank you to all of you for the great questions that come in. We still have many questions that have been asked. And if it's okay, Luca and you, we would send you the questions, and maybe you can, in written form, answer some of them. None of the political ones, we won't send you those. Okay. And then, so what we will do is we'll combine those in the next couple of days and send these out to, along with a mail and the summary slides that both of you will provide us, as well as a link to the recording of the seminar. We're recording this. We'll put it on YouTube like always, so that we can use this. This is a service from CEIBS to the public and to our alumni. And we look forward to also you joining our next webinar, as we mentioned. Thank you to both of you. Thank you for the great questions that came in from the participants. We'd like to say thank you to Luca and to Huawei for the partnership here and for being a part of this. Luca, thanks so much. Professor Yu, thank you very much. Wish everyone a great afternoon, great morning, great evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.